I'm Abigail, though most people call me Abby, and at 23, I never thought my own parents would betray me like this. The gaming PC I built with 3 years of savings from tutoring and weekend jobs, my $3,800 dream machine with custom water cooling and top-tier components, was gone when I returned from my friend's wedding. Sold for a fraction of its worth to fund my younger sister's shopping addiction. What my parents didn't realize was that this final betrayal would change everything about our family dynamic forever. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories about standing up for yourself when family crosses the line. Technology has been my escape and passion since I was 8 years old when my uncle gave me his old desktop computer. While other kids were playing with toys, I was fascinated by the inner workings of that bulky beige machine. I'd spend hours taking it apart, putting it back together, and learning how every component worked. My parents never really understood this interest, viewing it as a weird hobby that would eventually fade. Unlike my sister Chloe, who was born when I was 4, my interests weren't normal in their eyes. Chloe was the golden child from day one, the pretty, popular daughter who fit perfectly into their traditional expectations. Ballet lessons, cute dresses, and eventually expensive makeup and clothes became her world, and my parents happily funded every whim. Meanwhile, I saved birthday money from relatives to buy computer parts, teaching myself programming languages while my sister was having lavish birthday parties with dozens of friends. The difference in how we were treated wasn't subtle. When Chloe needed new dance shoes, they appeared immediately. When I needed a graphics card for school projects, I was told to save up because computers are just expensive toys. By 16, I was working weekends at a local electronics store, partly for the employee discount but mostly to fund my growing interest in building custom PCs. My boss recognized my knowledge and passion, often letting me help customers with technical questions despite my age. I tutored classmates in math and science after school, charging just enough to slowly build my savings. Every dollar went into a special account labeled Dream PC Fund. I remember my parents laughing when I showed them my component wish list. At 18. $3,000 for a computer? That's ridiculous, Abby. You could buy a used car instead, my dad said, shaking his head. But to me, this wasn't just a computer. It was my future, my portfolio, my gateway to the career I wanted in game development or 3D modeling. For 3 long years through community college, I worked and saved, researching every component, waiting for sales, and planning the perfect build. I created spreadsheets comparing different parts, joined forums to discuss optimal configurations, and watched countless build videos. When I finally had enough saved up at 21, I ordered everything. An AMD Ryzen 9 5950X processor, NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3090 graphics card, 64GB of RAM, custom water cooling system with hardline tubing, 2TB NVMe SSD, all housed in a beautiful tempered glass case with RGB lighting. Building it was a 2-day labor of love. I still remember the feeling when it posted on the first try, the satisfaction of perfect cable management, and the pride of seeing those benchmark numbers. That PC wasn't just expensive parts. It represented countless hours of overtime shifts, saying no to trips with friends, and choosing store-brand everything to save a few extra dollars. It was my independence and accomplishment in physical form. Meanwhile, Chloe's spending habits grew alongside her Instagram following. At 19, she'd already burned through 3 credit cards our parents had opened for emergencies. Her emergencies always seemed to coincide with fashion sales or festival tickets. Any attempt I made to establish boundaries in our shared home was immediately undermined. "Don't touch my computer" was met with, "Don't be selfish, Abby, your sister needs to print something for school." Permissions became expectations, and despite living in the same house, my room and belongings were treated as community property, while Chloe's space was sacred. I tried countless times to talk to my parents about this unequal treatment. "You're the oldest, you should be more mature," they'd say, or "Your sister is still finding herself." Apparently, at 19, Chloe was still finding herself through $200 jeans, while at 23, I was expected to be the responsible, self-sufficient adult who didn't need support or respect for my boundaries. Looking back, I should have seen what was coming, but sometimes even the most obvious red flags look normal when you've grown up with them your entire life. My friend Taylor's wedding couldn't have come at a worse time professionally, but I'd promised to be a bridesmaid months ago. I was in the final stages of a major project, creating 3D assets for an indie game developer who had taken a chance on me despite my limited professional portfolio. This contract could open doors to steady freelance work, but it required rendering complex models that only my custom-built PC could handle efficiently. The timing was tight, but I had planned everything meticulously, finished the main components. Before the weekend, attend the 3-day wedding in Chicago, then return for final touches before Tuesday's deadline. The night before leaving, I stayed up late, getting as much done as possible. My PC hummed efficiently as I worked, the custom cooling system keeping temperatures perfect despite the heavy workload. I saved multiple backups, left detailed notes for myself, and reluctantly shut everything down at 2 a.m. As a precaution, I texted my mom, "Please don't let anyone use my computer while I'm gone. I have a critical project due when I return." Her response was typical. "Stop worrying so much. Nobody wants your computer. Have fun at the wedding." I hesitated before leaving my room the next morning. Something made me take my external hard drive with the project backups, tucking it into my suitcase alongside my bridesmaid dress. In retrospect, maybe some part of me already knew what might happen. The wedding weekend started wonderfully. Taylor looked beautiful, the ceremony was touching, and for a brief time, I forgot about work and family stress. But by Sunday morning, an inexplicable anxiety had settled in my stomach. I checked my phone more frequently, feeling uneasy when I saw several missed calls from home but no messages explaining why. When I called back, no one answered. I texted Chloe, "Everything okay at home?" Her reply was strangely brief. "Yep, all good." Looking back at those 3 days, I realized there were clues everywhere. Mom had called asking how much my graphics card had cost, just out of curiosity. Dad had mentioned in passing that Chloe had been accepted to a prestigious summer program in New York that they would figure out how to afford. My sister had suddenly started posting Instagram stories from high-end boutiques with captions about treating herself. But I was distracted by wedding festivities and missed connecting these dangerous dots. During the flight home, I scrolled through project notes on my phone, mentally planning the 48 hours of work ahead. I needed every minute with my PC to make this deadline. I even splurged on an airport taxi rather than waiting for the cheaper shuttle bus, eager to get back to work. The house was unusually quiet when I arrived. Mom's car was in the driveway, but no one greeted me when I called out. I wheeled my suitcase to my bedroom, pushed open the door, and froze. The emptiness hit me before my brain fully processed what was missing. My desk looked wrong, barren. The dual monitors were gone. The beautiful custom PC with its glowing tempered glass side panel revealing meticulously arranged components and precise hardline water cooling tubes was gone. All that remained were loose cables dangling off the back of the desk, like severed arteries. For several long seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, all the air knocked from my lungs as the implications crashed over me in waves. My project, my deadline, my 3 years of savings, my future, all gone without a word. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see my mother, her expression a strange mixture of guilt and defiance. "Where is my computer?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She crossed her arms defensively. "We needed to help Chloe with an opportunity. You're established now. You can replace it eventually." My mind struggled to process her words as though they were spoken in a foreign language. "What opportunity could possibly justify taking my property?" I demanded, my voice rising with each word. Mom sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "Chloe got accepted to that exclusive summer fashion program in New York. The deposit was due immediately or she'd lose her spot. It's only for 10 weeks, but it could change her entire future." The absurdity struck me like a physical blow. My computer, my livelihood, my property, sold for my sister's summer hobby. Dad appeared in the doorway, his expression hardening when he saw my face. "Now listen, Abby, before you overreact. We're your parents, and sometimes we have to make tough decisions for this family. Chloe needs this opportunity more than you need that gaming setup." I felt a surge of rage at the dismissive way he referred to my professional equipment. It wasn't a gaming setup. It was a workstation I built myself with my own money. I have a deadline tomorrow that I can't meet without it. Who did you sell? It to? Maybe I can buy it back. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. We sold it to Craig's son, Dad finally admitted, referring to his golf buddy. He gave us $1,200 for the whole setup. $1,200. My $3,800 custom PC with thousands of hours of work invested in it, sold for less than a third of its value. The room spun around me as I gripped the edge of my empty desk for support. You sold my property for a fraction of what it's worth without my permission? That's theft. That's literally theft. Mom's face flushed with anger. Don't be so dramatic, Abigail. We're your parents, and it's not like you don't have your laptop. My old laptop couldn't handle rendering complex 3D models any more than a bicycle could compete in a Formula One race. Before I could explain this, we heard the front door open, followed by Chloe's cheerful voice calling out. She appeared in my doorway moments later, arms laden with shopping bags from high-end stores. She froze when she saw my face, a flicker of guilt quickly replaced by defensive hostility. What's her problem now? She asked our parents, as though I wasn't standing right there. She just found out about the computer, Mom said quietly. Chloe rolled her eyes. Seriously? It's just a stupid computer. Look what I got for New York. She proceeded to pull out designer clothes, shoes, and accessories, laying them across my bed without permission. The program has networking events with actual fashion industry people. I need to look the part. I stared at her in disbelief. You didn't just take money for the program. You spent money on a shopping spree. Mom jumped to her defense immediately. She needs appropriate clothes for the opportunity, Abby. You wouldn't understand because your industry is so casual. Dad checked his watch impatiently. Abby, you're 23 years old. You need to start thinking about more than just yourself. This is what families do. They support each other. Your sister has a real chance here. The implication that my career wasn't real was the final straw. I needed that computer for work. I have a deadline tomorrow that I can't meet now. I could lose this client and future referrals. My parents exchanged irritated glances, clearly not grasping the implications. Can't you just explain the situation? Surely they'll understand family emergencies, Mom suggested. I laughed bitterly. This wasn't an emergency. This was a choice you made to steal from one daughter to spoil the other. Chloe scoffed, holding up a black designer dress. Always so dramatic. You can save up again if it's that important. It's not like you spend money on anything else. In that moment, standing in my violated space, watching my sister casually display what my sacrifice had purchased, something fundamental shifted inside me. I realized with absolute clarity that nothing would change as long as I remained in this house. No boundary would be respected, no achievement valued, no property considered truly mine. I needed to get out, but first, I needed to salvage what I could professionally. I need to contact my client immediately, I said woodenly, turning away from my family. Please get out of my room. They left with obvious reluctance, my sister continuing to chatter about New York as they walked down the hallway. Alone, I collapsed into my desk chair, trying to steady my breathing as I contemplated the magnitude of what had just happened and what I needed to do next. My entire world had just been upended, not by accident or misfortune, but by deliberate choice, by the people who were supposed to protect me. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying not just that day's betrayal, but a lifetime of similar incidents that suddenly appeared in a harsh new light. The time my college fund was borrowed for Chloe's middle school trip to Washington, D.C. The Christmas my wish list items mysteriously disappeared while Chloe received everything she wanted. My high school graduation party canceled last minute because Chloe had a dance recital the same weekend. Each memory surfaced like bubbles in boiling water, too numerous to count, too painful to examine closely. By dawn, my eyes were swollen from silent tears, but my mind was crystalline in its clarity. The first order of business was damage control for my career. I emailed my client, explaining that my workstation had been stolen, which wasn't far from the truth, and that I needed a 48-hour extension. Then I called Taylor, whose wedding I'd just attended, knowing her husband worked in IT. I need to borrow a decent computer for 2 days. It's an emergency, I explained, my voice hoarse from crying. Taylor, without hesitation, offered her husband's gaming PC. "He's on a business trip until Thursday. Come get it now. You can work from our guest room if you need to." By 8 a.m., I was set up in their spare bedroom, transferring files from my backup drive. The borrowed computer wasn't ideal for 3D modeling, but it would allow me to finish the project adequately, if not perfectly. Around noon, Mom texted asking when I'd be home for dinner. I replied simply, "Working late. Don't wait up." I didn't return home until after midnight, intentionally avoiding another confrontation before I'd finished my professional obligations. The next day passed in a blur of intense work, fueled by determination and gas station coffee. I submitted the project just before the extended deadline with an apology for the delay and slight reduction in quality. The client was understanding, though I knew this incident would affect their trust in my reliability. I couldn't blame them. That evening, I finally returned home to find my parents waiting in the living room, their expressions a mixture of annoyance and puzzled concern. "We need to talk about your attitude," Dad began, his tone indicating he expected contrition from me. "You've been avoiding us, and frankly, your reaction to a simple family decision has been immature." I sat down across from them, feeling strangely calm. "I'd like to have a rational conversation about what happened," I said evenly. "I understand Chloe's program is important to you, but taking my property without permission was wrong. That computer represented 3 years of saving and was essential for my work." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "You're still going on about that computer? Family helps family, Abby. When you have children of your own, you'll understand that sometimes sacrifices have to be made." "But I was the only one sacrificing," I pointed out, "and I wasn't given a choice." Dad's face reddened. "Choice? You think we had a choice when your sister got this opportunity? These programs don't just come along every day. Sometimes as parents, we have to make executive decisions. Executive decisions about your adult daughter's personal property?" Mom leaned forward, her voice taking on the placating tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "Honey, you're being selfish. Chloe needed this chance, and you're established enough to recover from a small setback." The casual dismissal of my career and the violation of my boundaries as a small setback sent a surge of anger through me. Before I could respond, Chloe sauntered into the room, AirPods in, barely acknowledging my presence. "Mom, can I use your credit card for that pre-programmed shopping event tomorrow? They're giving students 20% off." She noticed me watching her and rolled her eyes. "Still pouting about your computer? Grow up." She flounced away without waiting for a response. Later that night, I called my friend Marcus, one of the few people who fully understood my family dynamic, having witnessed it for years. "They sold my PC to fund Chloe's shopping spree before some fashion program," I explained, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry through the walls. "Then they acted like I'm selfish for being upset about it." Marcus was silent for a moment before responding. "Abby, this isn't normal. You know that, right? Parents don't just sell their adult children's property without permission. That's theft, family or not." His words penetrated something in me, a lifetime of normalization crumbling under the weight of an outsider's perspective. "What do I do?" I whispered. "You know what you need to do," he replied gently. "You need to get out of there. This pattern isn't going to change. They don't respect you or your boundaries, and they never will as long as you're under their roof." After we hung up, I sat on my bed, Marcus's words echoing in my mind. This wasn't just about a computer anymore. It was about recognizing a toxic pattern that had defined my entire life, one that would continue indefinitely unless I took decisive action to break it. I looked around my bedroom, at the space that had never truly been mine, despite the years I'd spent in it. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a life completely separate from this house and the people in it. The thought was terrifying, but underneath the fear lay something unexpected, a profound sense of possibility and relief. With the clarity that comes from emotional rock bottom, I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it Exit Strategy. The moment I typed those words, a strange sense of calm washed over me. This wasn't an impulsive reaction, but a necessary step toward self-preservation. I needed a plan, methodical and thorough, to ensure I wouldn't come crawling back when things got difficult. First, housing. I researched apartment listings within commuting distance of my part-time tech support job, filtering for studios under $900 monthly. The options were depressingly few, most lacking basic amenities or located in questionable neighborhoods. I expanded my search radius and found slightly better options, but realized I'd need a roommate situation to make it work financially. Next, money. I'd been saving again after building my PC, thankfully in an account my parents couldn't access. The balance was modest, just under $2,400, enough for first month's rent and security deposit but leaving little cushion for furniture, utilities, and living expenses. I'd need to increase my hours at work immediately and pursue more freelance projects despite the setback with my equipment. Then I tackled the logistics of moving. What would I take? What could I leave behind? I inventoried my possessions, prioritizing essentials: clothes, personal documents, my laptop, the external hard drives with all my work. Furniture would have to wait, perhaps sourced from thrift stores or Facebook Marketplace over time. The more I planned, the more overwhelming it seemed, but also the more necessary. I couldn't continue living where my boundaries meant nothing, where my property could be disposed of without consideration, where my career was viewed as a hobby while my sister's interests were treated as sacred callings. That night, I contacted several friends discreetly, asking if anyone needed a roommate or knew of affordable housing options. Marcus immediately offered his spare room as a temporary solution. "It's yours for as long as you need it. No pressure, no timeline." His generosity nearly broke my composure, but I held it together, thanking him profusely. The next step was securing my important documents. While my parents were at work, I located my birth certificate, social security card, passport, and immunization records from the filing cabinet in their home office. I photographed them, then returned the originals to avoid raising suspicions, planning to request official copies later. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, gradually transferring small amounts from my existing account to avoid noticeable withdrawals. I changed passwords on all my accounts, setting up two-factor authentication where possible, and created a new email address my family didn't know about for important communications. Each evening after work, I slipped one or two valuable items into my backpack, things I couldn't bear to leave behind. The external hard drives with years of project work, heirloom jewelry from my grandmother, the collection of rare programming books I'd acquired over the years. I told myself this wasn't sneaking. These were my possessions. Yet the necessity of such secrecy highlighted just how dysfunctional my living situation had become. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade of normalcy at home. I ate dinner with my family, listening to Chloe's endless chatter about her upcoming program while my parents beamed with pride. I nodded and smiled appropriately, all while mentally cataloging which kitchen items I might need to purchase for my new place. My mother noticed something was different. "You're quieter than usual," she remarked one evening as I helped clear the dinner table. "Still upset about that computer? I thought you'd be over it by now." It took enormous self-control not to react to her dismissive tone. "Just tired from work," I replied neutrally. "They've increased my hours." She nodded absently, already turning her attention back to Chloe's latest shopping haul spread across the living room sofa. 2 weeks after the incident, as I'd come to think of it, I had secured a room in a 3-bedroom apartment shared by 2 female graduate students. The location wasn't ideal, adding 20 minutes to my commute, but the rent was manageable, and both women seemed respectful of privacy and personal space, concepts that had become invaluable to me. I signed the lease on my lunch break, the pen shaking slightly in my hand as I committed to my first truly independent living arrangement. The move-in date was set for the following Saturday, when my parents would be attending an all-day wedding of family friends. Chloe would be at a pre-program orientation, leaving the house empty. Marcus and 2 other friends agreed to help with the moving process, bringing their vehicles to transport what little I was taking. As the day approached, I experienced waves of doubt. Was I overreacting? Should I try one more conversation with my parents? Then I'd remember the casual way they'd dismissed my loss, the ease with which they'd violated my boundaries, and my resolve would strengthen. This wasn't an impulsive decision, but a necessary step toward self-respect and independence. The night before the move, I sat cross-legged on my bed, composing a letter to my family on my laptop. I wanted to explain my decision clearly without the emotion and interruptions that would inevitably derail an in-person conversation. I wrote and rewrote, trying to strike a balance between honesty and unnecessary cruelty. I documented patterns of behavior, specific incidents that had hurt me, and my need for space to heal and establish my own life. I explained that I wasn't cutting them off permanently but needed time and evidence of changed behavior before considering a closer relationship. The final version was 4 pages long, printed and sealed in an envelope I would leave propped against my pillow. My last act of preparation was confirming details with my moving crew, setting alarms, and trying unsuccessfully to sleep as anticipation and anxiety battled within me. Tomorrow would be the first day of my truly independent life. Terrifying, in its uncertainty but necessary for my growth and self-respect. Saturday morning arrived with a strange sense of surrealism. I woke before my alarm, my body tense with anticipation for what lay ahead. The house was already quiet. My parents had left early for pre-wedding breakfast with the couple. Chloe had departed the previous evening to stay with a friend closer to her orientation location. The emptiness felt symbolic, as though the house itself was acknowledging the transition about to take place. I sent a quick text to Marcus confirming the 10 a.m. arrival time, then began the final preparation. Most of my packing had been done incrementally over the past 2 weeks, boxes hidden in the back of my closet or disguised under laundry piles. Now I moved these boxes into the center of my room, adding last-minute items and sealing them with packing tape. The efficiency of my movements surprised me, as though I'd been rehearsing this moment for years. Perhaps in a way I had. By 9:45 a.m., everything was ready. 7 medium-sized boxes contained my entire life. Clothes, books, electronics, personal mementos. It seemed simultaneously too much and too little, this physical representation of 23 years. I sat at my now empty desk and opened the envelope containing my letter, rereading it one final time to ensure it conveyed everything I needed to say. Dear Mom, Dad, and Chloe, it began. By the time you read this, I will have moved out. This isn't a decision I've made lightly or in the heat of emotion, but one that has become necessary for my well-being and self-respect. The letter went on to detail specific patterns of behavior, the consistent prioritization of Chloe's wants over my needs, the disregard for my property and boundaries, the dismissal of my career and aspirations. I cited specific examples spanning years, culminating in the selling of my computer without permission. That wasn't simply about losing an expensive possession, I wrote. It represented your belief that my property, my work, and ultimately my personhood were less valuable and less deserving of respect than Chloe's desires. It showed me where I stand in this family, and it's not a place I can healthily remain. I explained my need for distance, setting clear terms for any future contact. I wasn't cutting them off entirely, but establishing boundaries that would need to be respected moving forward. I ended with both hope and resolve. I love you all, but I need to love myself enough to remove myself from a dynamic that has consistently diminished me. I hope someday we can build a healthier relationship based on mutual respect, but that can only happen after significant changes and time for healing. I sealed the envelope again, propping it against my pillow where it couldn't be missed. The Paulingi. Doorbell rang precisely at 10 a.m. Marcus and our friends Lisa and Jordan stood on the porch, their cars parked in the driveway. Their expressions held a mixture of concern and determination. You sure about this? Marcus asked quietly as they entered. I nodded, unable to articulate the complex emotions swirling within me. Okay then, let's get you out of here. The actual moving process took less than an hour. 4 people carrying 7 boxes and a few awkward items like my desk lamp and computer monitor. We worked mostly in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the significance of this transition. I made a final walkthrough of my bedroom, checking drawers and closet corners for anything forgotten. The space looked strangely untouched despite the removal of my possessions, as though it had never truly been mine to begin with. My gaze lingered on the letter propped against the pillow, the only evidence of disruption in the carefully maintained appearance. On impulse, I opened my desk drawer and left my house key inside, another silent statement of my departure. The drive to my new apartment passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Relief competed with anxiety, resolve with doubt, grief with anticipation. My friends chattered around me, intentionally keeping the mood light, but I remained lost in thought. What would my parents' reaction be? Would they understand the necessity of my decision, or would they dismiss it as another example of my overreaction and selfishness? We arrived at the apartment building, a modest 3-story structure in a mixed residential neighborhood. My new roommates, Emma and Priya, greeted us warmly, helping carry boxes to my room. The space was small but clean, with a window overlooking a quiet courtyard. My few possessions looked almost comically inadequate in the empty room, emphasizing both the freshness of my start and the magnitude of what I'd left behind. After setting up my bed and organizing the essentials, my friend suggested going out for lunch to celebrate the move. I declined, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what I'd just done. I think I need some time alone to process everything, I explained. They understood, leaving me with hugs and promises to check in later. Alone in my new room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the silence both comforting and intimidating. I checked my phone, half expecting frantic messages from my family, but there was nothing yet. They wouldn't be home for hours. I set the phone aside and looked around at my new space, this blank canvas of possibilities. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own, responsible solely for myself and answerable to no one else's expectations or demands. The realization brought with it a wave of exhaustion so profound, I barely managed to kick off my shoes before curling up on the bare mattress. The last thought before sleep claimed me was a curious mixture of sadness and freedom. Nothing would ever be the same again, and that was exactly as it needed to be. The buzzing of my phone dragged me from a dreamless sleep. Disoriented, I fumbled for it in the unfamiliar darkness, the screen's harsh light revealing multiple missed calls and a barrage of text messages. It was 7:38 p.m., and my family had discovered my absence. The first voicemail was from my mother, her tone shifting from confusion to worry. "Abby, where are you? We're home and your things are gone. Call us immediately." The second, from my father, had already escalated to anger. "Abigail, this is completely unacceptable behavior. Call home now." Then Chloe, surprisingly emotional. "What the actual hell, Abby? Mom's freaking out and Dad's about to call the police. Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way to do it." I sat up, fully awake now, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. I typed a brief text to all three. "I'm safe. I've moved out. Read my letter. I'll call tomorrow after work." The response was immediate, my phone erupting with incoming calls that I silenced one after another. Finally, a text from my father. "We read your ridiculous letter. This is a massive overreaction to a minor family disagreement. Your mother is in tears. Come home now and we'll discuss this reasonably." His dismissal of my carefully explained feelings as a ridiculous overreaction and a minor disagreement only confirmed I'd made the right decision. I turned off my phone, knowing I needed a clear head for my first night in the new apartment. The next morning, I powered my phone back on to find 37 text messages and 13 voicemails. The tone had evolved throughout the night, from anger to bargaining to guilt-tripping. My mother had contacted my Aunt Sarah, who sent a concerned text asking if I was okay. Chloe's messages had devolved from incredulous anger to tearful accusations about tearing the family apart, right before her big opportunity. Most disturbing were the messages from extended family members I rarely spoke with, clearly recruited by my parents to pressure me. "Your parents are devastated," wrote an uncle I saw once a year at Christmas. "Family disagreements should stay within the family," admonished a cousin I barely knew. Only Aunt Lauren, my mother's younger sister, sent something different. "I understand more than you might think. Call if you need to talk. No pressure, no judgment." I remembered vaguely that Lauren had limited contact with my grandparents for years, though the reasons had never been discussed openly. I arrived at work exhausted but determined to maintain professionalism. My supervisor noticed immediately. "Rough weekend?" she asked as I refilled my coffee cup for the third time before noon. "Just moved to a new place," I replied, not elaborating. She nodded understandingly. "Big transitions are always tough. Let me know if you need to adjust your schedule this week." Her simple kindness nearly undid me, so unexpected after years of having my needs dismissed at home. During my lunch break, I finally called my mother, bracing for the onslaught. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded immediately. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? What are we supposed to tell people?" The fact that her first concern was appearances rather than my well-being reinforced my decision. "Mom, I explained everything in my letter. I need space and respect for my boundaries." Boundaries? We're your parents. You don't set boundaries with family. This is about that computer, isn't it? You're punishing us all because you can't get over one little thing. "It wasn't little to me," I said quietly. "And it wasn't just the computer. It was a lifetime of similar incidents that showed me where I stand in this family." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my mother cycling through guilt, anger, and minimization of my concerns. We ended with nothing resolved, her final words a tearful, "I don't even know who you are anymore." My father's call came that evening as I was setting up my small desk in the corner of my new room. His approach was different, more authoritarian. "This childish tantrum needs to end now, Abigail. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. Is that what you wanted?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I didn't need to justify my decision. "Dad, I'm not coming back. I'm an adult making a healthy choice for myself. I hope eventually you can respect that." "Respect? You want to talk about respect after the stunt you've pulled?" Sneaking away while we were gone, leaving a melodramatic letter full of accusations and historical revisionism? That's not how adults handle problems. His selective memory was astonishing. How should I have handled it, Dad? Previous attempts at conversation were dismissed. My concerns were minimized. My property was taken without permission. He scoffed. Always back to that computer. Material possessions shouldn't matter more than family. It wasn't about the possession. It was about the disrespect it represented. We talked in circles for 20 minutes before I finally ended the call, emotionally drained but more convinced than ever that separation was necessary. The next week brought new challenges beyond family drama. My bank account dwindled rapidly, with startup costs for independent living, dishes, cleaning supplies, a used desk chair from Goodwill, groceries that weren't magically restocked by parents. I increased my hours at work, taking every available shift, and scoured freelance job boards for projects I could complete on my modest laptop. The hardest part was explaining my situation to potential clients. "I'm rebuilding my portfolio after a setback," I would say vaguely, avoiding the full story that seemed too personal and potentially unprofessional to share. One evening, I received an unexpected call from Aunt Lauren. "I heard you moved out rather dramatically," she said without preamble. "Your mother called me in tears, expecting me to talk some sense into you." "And will you?" I asked cautiously. She laughed, a warm sound free of judgment. "Abby, when I was 24, I cut contact with your grandparents for 2 years after they continuously violated my privacy and undermined my career choices. Sometimes distance is the only way to reset unhealthy dynamics." Her understanding was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning swimmer. "They make me feel crazy for being upset about what happened," I admitted. "That's called gaslighting, honey. And it's a standard technique when someone challenges an established family system." We talked for over an hour, her insights illuminating patterns I'd sensed but couldn't articulate. For the first time since moving out, I felt truly validated in my decision. By the 3rd week in my new apartment, a tentative routine had formed. Work, freelance projects in the evenings, occasional shared meals with my roommates who respected my privacy while offering quiet companionship. The constant barrage of messages from my family had slowed to occasional guilt-laden texts, which I responded to politely but briefly. Chloe had left for New York, apparently still blaming me for ruining what should have been her exciting departure, with family drama. The financial strain remained significant. My old laptop struggled with even basic design tasks, drastically limiting the freelance work I could accept. I had resigned myself to months of saving before I could afford even a modest replacement for my lost PC when an unexpected opportunity arose through a professional connection I'd nearly forgotten. Jason Chen had been a guest speaker in one of my community college classes 2 years earlier. As the founder of a local tech startup, he had shared insights about entrepreneurship and building a career in technology. I'd asked several questions during his presentation and followed up with an email thanking him for his time. We'd exchanged a few messages about my projects, then lost touch as often happens with casual professional connections. Now desperate for any opportunity to advance my career despite my equipment limitations, I crafted a careful email, reminding him of our previous interaction and inquiring about potential freelance opportunities with his company. I'm particularly interested in projects that wouldn't require high-end equipment, I explained, not detailing the reason for this limitation. He responded surprisingly quickly, suggesting a coffee meeting the following week. The cafe he chose was upscale, making me acutely conscious of my discount store outfit and scuffed laptop bag. Jason greeted me warmly, remembering specific details from our previous conversations that impressed me with his attentiveness. After brief pleasantries, he asked what prompted my current job search. Perhaps it was exhaustion or the genuine interest in his expression, but I found myself sharing the condensed version of recent events. My workstation was sold without my knowledge or permission, significantly limiting the projects I can take on until I can afford to replace it. I kept my tone neutral, focusing on the professional impact rather than family drama. Jason's expression shifted from surprise to something I couldn't quite read. "That's a challenging situation," he said carefully. "What specs would you need in a replacement system to handle your typical workload?" The question led to a detailed technical discussion that seemed to impress him. By the end of our meeting, he had offered me a 3-month contract position with his company, working on UI design for their new product. The salary was modest but steady, and he casually mentioned they had workstations available in their office that I could use for rendering or processing intensive tasks. "We're flexible about in-office versus remote work," he explained. "Use our equipment as needed, complete the rest on your own schedule." The opportunity felt like the first real break since the disaster with my PC. I accepted immediately, starting the following Monday. The contract position quickly became a lifeline, not just financially, but emotionally. My coworkers were respectful professionals who valued ideas and contributions regardless of age or background. The company culture emphasized work-life balance, a radical concept after years of having my time and space constantly invaded at home. Most importantly, having access to professional-grade equipment again allowed me to rebuild my portfolio with higher-quality projects. During my second month at the startup, I shared my story anonymously on a tech community forum, seeking advice on affordable ways to rebuild a workstation on a limited budget. The post unexpectedly went viral within the community, with hundreds of supportive comments and practical suggestions. Several users offered spare components they no longer needed, while others shared similar stories of family members who didn't respect their property or career choices. The solidarity was overwhelming and healing. One private message stood out, from the username TechFounder50. "Your situation resonates with me. I built my first company using equipment my family ridiculed as a waste of money. I'd like to help. We're upgrading our design department next month and have several well-maintained systems being cycled out. You're welcome to one of them at no cost." I was skeptical of the offer's legitimacy until I realized the sender was Jason himself. When I thanked him at work the next day, he waved off my gratitude. "Consider it an investment in talent," he said simply. "Just pay it forward someday." With a decent workstation again, albeit not as powerful as my custom build, I was able to take on more complex freelance projects alongside my contract work. My savings began to rebuild, and I gradually furnished my small room with secondhand finds that nevertheless felt more truly mine than anything in my parents' house had ever been. The emotional journey was less straightforward than the professional one. Some days I felt confident and empowered by my decision to leave. Others brought waves of grief for the family relationships I'd wished for, rather than the ones I actually had. I began seeing a therapist through a sliding scale community program, working through the complex emotions of family estrangement and rebuilding self-worth. My first holiday season alone approached with mixed emotions. Thanksgiving had always been a major family event, with relatives traveling from several states to gather at my parents' house. The thought of spending it alone was both liberating and terrifying. I received the expected guilt-laden invitation from my mother. "The whole family will be here. Your absence will raise questions we don't want to answer. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." After careful consideration and discussion with my therapist, I declined politely but firmly. Instead, I accepted an invitation to Friendsgiving hosted by coworkers from the startup, where I contributed homemade apple pie from my grandmother's recipe and enjoyed a day free from family tension and walking on eggshells. The evening of actual Thanksgiving, alone in my room after returning from the friend gathering, I received an unexpected text from Chloe. Thanksgiving was weird without you. Grandma kept asking where you were, and Mom got all weird and changed. The subject: Dad drank too much and went to bed early. It was the first message from her that wasn't accusatory or manipulative. I responded carefully. I missed certain traditions but needed the space. How's the program going? What followed was our first genuine conversation in months. She described her experiences in New York, the challenges and disappointments alongside the exciting opportunities. When she mentioned struggling with a particularly demanding professor, I offered sympathy rather than the competitive response that had characterized our interactions for years. The distance had somehow created space for a different kind of relationship, to begin forming, one based on adult communication rather than the rivalry our parents had fostered. As December progressed, I created new traditions for myself. I bought a tiny potted Christmas tree for my desk, strung with miniature lights. I joined a community volunteer group wrapping gifts for underprivileged children. I attended a winter solstice celebration hosted by Priya, one of my roommates, experiencing customs entirely different from those I'd grown up with. Each new experience reinforced that family could be chosen, not just inherited, and that holidays could hold meaning beyond the narrow traditions I'd known. The contract position with the startup was extended into the new year, with hints that it might convert to a permanent role. My freelance client list grew steadily, my portfolio rebuilding with increasingly sophisticated projects. I moved from surviving to genuinely thriving in my independence, surprising even myself with my resilience. 6 months after my abrupt departure, I had created a life that felt authentically mine in a way I'd never experienced before. The relationship with my family remained complicated. With tentative steps toward communication balanced against firm boundaries, I refused to compromise. My mother still occasionally attempted guilt tactics. My father vacillated between anger and grudging respect for my independence. And Chloe slowly developed a relationship with me, separate from her role as the favored child. The journey wasn't complete, the wounds not fully healed, but I had found strength I never knew I possessed and built a life that honored my worth rather than diminishing it. 1 year after my departure, I sat in my new one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built from scratch. The startup position had indeed become permanent, with a salary increase that allowed me to move from the shared living arrangement to my own space. The walls were adorned with framed digital art I'd created, the furnishings a curated collection of secondhand treasures and carefully chosen new pieces. Most prominently, on a proper desk in the corner, sat my new workstation. Not as elaborate as my original custom build, but entirely mine, purchased with my own money, housed in a case with a subtle but symbolic lock. The journey to this point had been neither straight nor easy. Financial struggles had taught me budgeting skills I'd never developed in my parents' home. Loneliness had pushed me to build meaningful friendships rather than retreating into work. The loss of family support had forced me to develop internal resilience rather than seeking external validation. Each challenge had ultimately strengthened rather than diminished me. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something I never anticipated. After months of tension, accusations, and attempted manipulation, my father had reached out with an unexpected message. "Your mother and I have been discussing your letter. While we don't agree with everything you wrote, we recognize there may be some validity to your perspective. Would you be willing to meet on neutral ground to talk?" The coffee shop conversation that followed was awkward, but marginally productive. For the first time, they listened more than they spoke, though their understanding remained limited by their own perspectives and defenses. "We never intended to hurt you," my mother insisted. "We were just trying to support both our daughters as best we could." "Intent doesn't negate impact," I replied, a phrase borrowed from my therapist. And the impact was that I consistently felt less valued and less respected than Chloe. My father struggled visibly with this concept. "We love both our daughters equally," he stated, as though repetition could make it true despite years of evidence to the contrary. "Equal love doesn't mean identical treatment," I explained. "But it should mean equal respect for boundaries and property." The conversation didn't result in dramatic reconciliation or tearful apologies. but it established a foundation for a different kind of relationship moving forward. I set clear conditions: no uninvited visits to my apartment, no financial entanglements, and absolute respect for my personal property and decisions. They agreed, though I suspected they viewed these boundaries as temporary concessions rather than permanent changes to our dynamic. My sister's evolution surprised me most. Her New York program had ended with a job offer that fell through, returning her to our hometown with deflated expectations and a new appreciation for financial reality. Without me in the house to serve as counterbalance, our parents' attention and expectations had focused entirely on her, creating pressure she found suffocating. I never realized how exhausting it is being the center of their universe, she admitted during one of our monthly lunch meetings. Everything I do is either perfect or devastating. There's no room to just be average or make normal mistakes. This shared understanding of our parents' dysfunctional patterns created an unexpected bridge between us. Not quite friendship, not quite typical sisterhood, but a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. During one particularly difficult family dinner, when old patterns threatened to reemerge, she unexpectedly allied with me, telling our parents, "Abby's right about this. You're not listening to what she's actually saying." Their shocked expressions would have been comical if the moment hadn't been so meaningful. I suggested family therapy as a condition for more regular contact, presenting it as an opportunity for improved communication rather than an accusation of dysfunction. To my surprise, they eventually agreed, though the process was halting and inconsistent. The therapist helped translate my experiences in ways my parents could better understand, while also helping me recognize the generational patterns and limitations they themselves operated within. My professional life flourished as my emotional health improved. The startup promoted me to lead designer on a major project. My freelance work attracted increasingly prestigious clients, and I began mentoring younger designers through an online community program. The financial security that resulted wasn't just about comfort, but about establishing the independence that protected me from ever being vulnerable to family control again. Most profound was my internal transformation. The people-pleasing habit of a lifetime gradually gave way to authentic self-expression. The constant need for validation faded as I learned to trust my own judgment. The fear of conflict that had kept me silent for years transformed into an ability to advocate firmly but respectfully for my needs and boundaries. One evening, as I put the finishing touches on a particularly challenging project, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Your father and I were going through old photos today and found this. Thought you might like to have it." The attached image showed 7-year-old me, gap-toothed and beaming, holding up a crude drawing of a computer I'd made in crayon. The unexpected gesture touched something deep within me, a recognition that healing might come in small moments rather than grand gestures. I replied simply, "Thank you. I'd like that." The journey wasn't over. Family dynamics established over decades don't transform overnight, and patterns have a way of reasserting themselves during stress or conflict. There were still difficult conversations, boundary violations I needed to address, and moments when estrangement seemed the only viable option. But there were also genuine efforts at understanding, small acknowledgments of past mistakes, and a slowly evolving relationship based on who we were becoming rather than who we had been. The greatest lesson wasn't about family at all, but about self-worth. I had learned that protecting your boundaries isn't selfish but necessary, that sacrificing your well-being for others' comfort isn't noble but destructive, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from those who cannot or will not respect your personhood. A year ago, I would never have imagined myself where I now stood, professionally successful, emotionally healthier, and genuinely proud of the person I had become through adversity. The computer that had been taken from me had represented more than just expensive components. It had symbolized my dreams, my work ethic, and my right to own the fruits of my labor. Its loss had been painful, but it had catalyzed a transformation, far more valuable than any possession. Have you ever had to walk away from someone or something that was hurting you, even though others didn't understand your decision? Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more journeys of self-discovery, and share this video with someone who might need permission to prioritize their own well-being. And remember, blood may determine, Your relatives, but love, respect, and healthy boundaries define your true family. Thank you for listening to my story.